Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Quantum immortality. How real is it? Is it possible to prove?
I have experienced more than 200 déjà vu, each one reloading after death, and also have a memory of dying when I was a kid. So yes, it can be real. But then I'm getting old like everybody else and suffering health issues like everybody else, so physically I know this body is going to die. But will I, as being, die? I think quantum immortality does not address the possibility of us having other bodies that are activated when we get so old our current bodies can't hold us any longer. And this is not shown to us because it is the first timeline you are experiencing. Like in the chakras, the first one is the most material, the most dense one. So is our timelines.
I have thought about the idea that you become schizophrenic right as you're dying, so your mind basically compartmentalizes your death, and you get born into another delusion your mind replaces the prior reality with. Probably could have written that clearer, but it'll have to do. Not wanting to phone post all day.
You are correct. Everyone's death is predetermined because we aren't even living in the present. There is no way to alter when you died. You just shift.
Your whole life flashes before your eyes when you die. How true is this?
Never happened to me. I always just come to about 100 feet away from where I initially died, but that could just be because of quantum immortality.
Can you explain what happens when you come back to life? Do you go back to the same reality, or is it off? Does your soul equal the reality and it just kind of works itself out like a final destination? No one has the answers.
Not that anon, but I am a multiple-time quantum survivor, so I can shed some light on it. The way quantum immortality works is that each individual consciousness exists in what is effectively its own dimension, allowing for the free will of each sovereign entity to be perfectly expressed in their life, while allowing for a collective to exist as well. This is the way that timelines splinter and are shifted by individuals by practices such as the law of attraction and other intention-based practices. When someone wants to take their own life, this desire is often, most times, a temporary one and not representative of their true will. They don't really want their life to end, just for a feeling to leave. So when the body is broken, the soul regrets it, and since it finds itself outside of time, the correction is instantaneous and perceived as a failed attempt in some way. This doesn't mean that self-termination is impossible, but it means you really have to want it with all your heart in your soul for you to perceive it. Any attempt leads to the splitting of timelines, though, where you will be gone from someone else's experience, life and timeline from their main individual perspective, but they'll still be around for you. All this is possible because of the infinite nature of reality. Anything that can happen will happen, even if it seemingly interferes with something else. This doesn't really change anything too much, because reality is constantly shifting. An example being the past simply being a framework to house the present, as seen by phenomenon like the Mandela effect. Also, by the infinite nature of reality, this information is correct, almost right, and wrong, depending on various personal factors for any individual who comes across this. Just remember that everything is magical, and all life is sacred to a shocking degree.
Yeah, it actually happens before death as part of the dying process, and that's why people are able to experience it and record it as a known physical phenomenon. There are other cool things that happen, like the release from the pain of the nervous system and the perception of eternal timelessness and unity with the universe. People forget that just being incarnated is a kind of pain from feeling in general, and it's an incredible relief to be sure. Also, the way that events are perceived outside of time happens in a way that is completely devoid of urgency, or even gravity for that matter.
I wonder if it's tied to genetic memory or something where when you're put in imminent danger, your body tries to recollect every possible conscious or unconscious bit of data that could help you make a split-second decision to save you. And if it works, then what you did is saved in your genes. Like it's not just your memory, but every moment that an ancestor had a near-death experience is sorted through as well. The reason chickens run from the shadow of a hawk is that some chicken ancestors saw the shadow of a hawk and saw their life flash before their eyes, and then ran, and then that was hardwired into their children.
I discovered time travel, then got killed and respawned in this world because of quantum immortality. Whenever you die in a dream, that is an alternate reality that you shifted from. Last night, I had the strangest dream I have ever had. Discover a method of time traveling. I demonstrated to my family by showing a recording of a baseball game with one outcome, and then the altered outcome that I created a new timeline with by distracting a batter to make him get a strike. I asked my brother about going back further in time than that, but he said others online that have tried it came back with messed up, mentally ill minds, and that traveling super far back in time should be avoided. I made the mistake of revealing all of this with my iPhone nearby, which had all of it recorded by Apple. The next thing I knew, there was a man in a suit in our house, not saying he was a government or glowy or anything, but just a friend. And I could not think in my mind of him as anything other than friend. Like I was being mind-controlled with some Jedi mind trick. He asked for all of our IDs, and we showed them to him. Then, as I was thinking, why doesn't someone use this to go back in time and stop Hitler? The moment I thought that, a man who looked like Frankenstein with glasses appeared in the room. He said nothing and conveyed a psychic message to me that time travel will be used to save humanity. I shook his hand, and then the words, "alien invasion," appeared midair before him. The fact that I thought this Frankenstein guy was totally normal being in my house was another sign I was mind-controlled, and the message about alien invasion suggests this is how the aliens will invade. The will use Jedi mind-trick-tier mind control to make the presence seem normal around us. Nobody will question it, and they will take over and do who knows what. I was killed in that reality for realizing this. When I woke up, beware of the alien invasion coming soon. You will talk with aliens like is normal, and you will think they are your friends, but they are not.
Had a buddy who was obsessed with DMT ingestion to the point where that's all he cared about. For those who don't know, DMT is a chemical that is released along with other unknown chemicals when you die. He explained to me that when you smoke it, you go out of body and shoot past all the planets, stars, etc. Eventually you come to a point where your entire life flashes like a 1-minute movie. After this, he stated that you are thrown into a geometrical dimension defined with geometrical shapes and animals floating around. After that, everything goes black until a tiny white dot appears and everything goes white. Supposedly, at the end of all this, he came across 3 beings without form, but could converse with him. When asked what they said to him, he stated that he could not remember much, but that what was expressed to him about life from the questions he asked were things I did not want to know. He then stated that they said he was not ready yet, and within 3 seconds they shot him back into his body. So yeah, that's what I remember from my conversation with him more than a decade ago about this topic. Hope it helps.
See, our universe is a simulation. As part of the simulation, the data of your life is retained after you die. No data is lost, otherwise there wouldn't be a point. Every component is valuable to the whole. When you die, you, or rather the data of your life, get compressed into a read-only file. The beginning of this process can be experienced by those undergoing a near-death experience. The so-called life flashes before your eyes, which is really the information of your existence beginning compression. It is true that sometimes data leaks out. We call this a ghost, but it's fragmented, mostly you on repeat. Moments out of time influencing the rest of the sim, even though it shouldn't. It's a complex system, so these kinds of glitches are, sadly, unavoidable. Very, very rarely, a ghost can appear to be self-aware, able to communicate, but this isn't really life. Nothing you do or experience in this state can be saved to your file once it's set to read-only. It's just a shitty copy of yourself that can't remember anything.
This is partially accurate. Frankly, we don't know if the system is so complicated that data leaks. There do seem to be a number of glitches in the matrix. Search for videos of birds frozen mid-flight, for instance, but whether your save file can leak can't be known. That's because data about you is also stored in relation to different objects. For instance, Have you ever heard of hauntings associated with items or locations with deep significance to the departed? I'm sure you have. To maintain a proper accounting, the simulated universe needs to retain the who, what, where, and whys in order to maintain continuity. So shit like, Anon moved this letter from point A to point B on Sunday, March 21st, 2018. The more you're associated with an item or location, the more of this data accumulates. This is the data that leaks, not your save file. So if a person sees an apparition of you, or senses something you did, or if the item tries to revert back to an old location but only manages a tiny bit of seemingly telekinetic motion, that's not really you, the you stored with all your other personal information. Technically, it is a ghost of you, but it is generated not by yourself but by the information stored about the item or location. Whether that is comforting or disturbing depends on you. I've seen people suggest that your data isn't just archived after you die, but there is a kind of virtual heaven where everyone who has died is allowed to mingle, like a giant party, in an area partitioned off from the rest of the simulated universe. The only evidence I've come across is people who undergo a near-death experience and claim that they don't just see their life flash before their eyes, but are able to access this partitioned space and communicate with deceased loved ones. Whether that's true or not, I can't say.
I find this intriguing, but I have some questions. The save file business makes sense, but would you really store a person's interactions with an object in such detail within the data for the object itself? Wouldn't it be easier to just note the link to cross-reference the save file? I realize redundancy isn't a bad thing in context. It would help provide data security. But how much information would you really need to save? I'm asking this because if an object significant to the deceased has a link to the save file itself, then seances to commune with the dead make sense to me. If there is a link, and we can figure out a way to trick the simulation into accessing the file, it should actually be possible to commune with the dead. If no new information can be written onto the save file, the dead won't retain a memory of the interaction. But I have a doubt because there's instances where people summon the dead multiple times and earlier conversations can be revisited. I know some people hate simulation theory, but I find it more comforting if this is true. I don't trust the universe to be kind to wandering spirits. A simulation, though, will retain its previous data by default because it has to know how everything fits together, and any deleted data is just a waste. Why simulate a person at all if they're just going to trash the results? It's in their best interest to maintain data integrity and even backups.
Have you ever heard of ghosts weakening over time and becoming less pronounced? I don't mean the activity becoming more sporadic, I mean ghostly apparitions become less clear over time. It's almost like data becoming fragmented. I find that pretty scary, though. If the universe isn't a sim, it still means ghosts. Like the bodies they inhabited, decay over time. Maybe that's remnants and echoes and the soul really is immortal. Also, if we're a sim, won't the simulation eventually end and the data get wiped, probably before the simulator is donated to an inner-city middle school? That might happen at the end of the simulated universe's life, so from our perspective, still an eternity. I still don't like it.
I stumbled upon quantum archaeology, which is the thought that one day we will be able to resurrect people from the past, from the quantum state of their brain, and teleport them back. Pretty fascinating stuff, but got me thinking that instead of maybe waiting for that tech to hit, maybe we are already living in it now. Maybe when you die, you go to the bliss and are offered a chance for another go-around in the physical. Same thing would happen with quantum archaeology, where you don't just want to bring back souls against their will, but maybe you give them an option. I'd really like to know how my life would be different if I made other choices, and maybe one day I can live out those forks in the road.
Consciousness being a product of quantum effects is looking more and more likely to be true too. They recently determined that tryptophan can produce quantum effects when arranged in the same tube structures that it appears in our neurons.
Fun fact: scientists were able to encode malware into human DNA. The intent was to show that harmful coding can be slipped into gene sequencing software via the DNA it is analyzing. But there has been suggestion that this proves we ourselves are merely computer coding. I don't know about that, but it could mean that if we are in a simulation and we can somehow figure out the programming language, we can use similar methods to inject our own code into the sim. We could potentially rewrite reality itself. or crash the entire simulation, effectively killing all of us.
I'm afraid of death, anons, the idea of the eternal oblivion of self. Recently, I have had crippling existential dread regarding the seemingly very likely possibility that there truly is nothing after death, just non-existence forever. Everyone says it should not be feared because you will not experience it, but isn't of any consolation to me. The feeling of dread of non-existence is the same. Tell me, anons, is there any hope of an afterlife?
Anon, I just want to start out by stating that I have shared the same fear as you. Whenever I would talk about it online with people, I would get the usual unhelpful hand waves such as, "When we are, death is not," or, "It will be just like anesthesia." We've all heard it before. But none of it helps because it all inevitably highlights what it is which makes the thought so terrifying. But I want to let you know that it is going to be okay. What genuinely helped out was making sure to spend my time doing things I genuinely loved, which brought me genuine satisfaction, spending time with loved ones as much as possible, and learning to focus on things which made me happy and laugh. It can be hard, especially with how consuming thanatophobia can be. I have OCD, so I've been here with a variety of topics, but you will get to a point where you feel so happy and satisfied that even the notion of death will seem not so scary. You learn to, not so much accept it or defy it, but to not be bothered by it as you genuinely begin to embrace a happy life. As someone who is innately spiritual and has had supernatural experiences, I don't think it's wise because of your thanatophobia. You are going to develop a neurotic relationship with your beliefs with the unconscious knowledge that you are only embracing them as a cop-out. The truth is, even as someone who has had supernatural experiences which were so unlikely coincidences, I still have doubts. If it is any consolation, there are reasons to believe. There are verified case studies for reincarnation by Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, and near-death experiences from people who experienced lucid visions of dead relatives and their culture's respective afterlife. It's not 100% foolproof, but it does strengthen the case for an afterlife. Also keep in mind that eternal oblivion seems the most obvious likelihood because it makes the most intuitive sense, but intuition is not always correct.
After 5 long years of dedicated practice, I've finally mastered Robert Monroe's method for out-of-body experiences. I've read and reread his books and Bruce Moen's works, and I can confirm that everything written in those pages is exactly what I've experienced. One of the most shocking things I encountered was finding a place where people end up based on their behavior in life. Let me tell you about a guy I used to know who died young. He was a massive asshole, and I found the place he ended up in. It's a city, just like on Earth, with buildings, houses, and all that. The twist? Every single person there is an asshole. Men, women, children, they're all there because they enjoyed being complete asses to each other. I watched in awe as the guy I knew continued being his usual self, only to have someone else, probably someone who'd been there longer, completely destroy him in an act of one-upmanship. It was shocking to see the level of sadism and cruelty they inflicted on each other, almost like a sport or a game. I'm not really sure what life is all about, but what I've seen through my out-of-body experiences is seriously sadistic and makes me question the nature of existence itself. If this is what awaits people who thrive on being jerks, it's like a cosmic justice system, but it's twisted and disturbing as hell. Anyone else had similar experiences or insights? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I haven't been knocked unconscious by a blow to the head, but I have been made unconscious with anesthetics during surgeries. One particular surgery was life or death, and I remember speaking with someone or something during that time. I don't remember what we talked about, but I do remember that I became much more calm after it. To this day, I'm not sure if I had a glimpse of the afterlife, but I still think that I came quite close to death during that surgery. In fact, several months after that, I had a sort of lingering suspicion that I had, in fact, died and was experiencing the afterlife, and that the afterlife was a sort of idealistic projection of the continuation of your normal life, since my life was going better in those months than it ever had. This suspicion was completely disproven when some sucky things started happening, though. Another thing. I'm not entirely sure of this, but I may have been asked if I wanted to cross over. If that did happen, I'm not entirely sure I declined, but I have a few guesses. Parents would have been devastated beyond belief. Sister was going through some mental health problems at the time. She certainly would have attempted suicide or committed a massive act of violence. Didn't have many friends, but I was close with the ones I did have, and they'd all have been super upset to lose me. I know for a fact that at least a couple of them don't believe in an afterlife. Surgeon was super nice, and I didn't want her to feel guilty for losing a patient. There were likely med students watching, and I didn't want to traumatize them. I wanted to graduate high school in this world. Ultimately, I guess it just wasn't my time. I sometimes wonder how things would be going for me, my family, and my friends if I did decide to pass on that day. Even though 80% to 90% of people who came back to life don't remember anything, you can't compare death and being unconscious. When you're unconscious, you still have brain activity. Your body isn't deprived of oxygen, and your heart's still beating. Despite knowing that brain activity continues after death for 7 or 10 minutes, it still doesn't explain how some people who've been gone for almost an hour can remember anything. There were times, especially about a year ago, when I had wished that I had chosen to pass on. But now I'm quite happy with where I am.
Up until very recently, I had never even heard of quantum immortality. Weirdly, I actually think I have experienced it before. 2 instances immediately come to mind. In one, back when I was a teenager and a drug dealer, a rival gang member was selling drugs in our area, so we set him up. A friend and I rushed him in an alley, took his phone, then he started stabbing me. The guy ran away, and my friend was focusing his attention on me. This particular friend was a very violent guy, and had he not seen me being stabbed, would have probably stabbed the guy we were robbing. He'd seen plenty of stabbings before, only when I checked myself, I hadn't been stabbed. This kid had just been banging a sideways closed fist against me to make it look like he was stabbing me. Except, I saw the glint of the knife. I don't know how to explain that. My friend was majorly weirded out, and so was I. Another instance was a few years later. I was stabbed 16 times in an attack by 4 people. After the attack, the wounds were minuscule. Tiny little pokes, no more than half a centimeter in each one. The guys who stabbed me had killed someone a week earlier, then killed another person a month after. They were not amateurs. I don't understand how the entire group stabbing me, no one managed to actually go deep. I walked it off and went to hospital in a taxi. After both of these, my life got really, really weird and changed. Is there any evidence for quantum immortality, or does anyone have any of their own experiences with it?
The time I experienced quantum immortality, be me around February 2019, riding my bike to a friend's house. I know the road and it's very, very chill. At most I was driving around 30 kilometers per hour, 20 miles per hour in fat units. About 10 minutes to my destination, some dude driving a Chevy Cruze comes at around 60 kilometers per hour and screwed me up. I remember seeing the roof of the car from the sky. That's it! I am dead! What a stupid way to die. Fast forward a couple seconds. I'm on the pavement, a little bit of pain on my back. Try to find my phone and my glasses. Ask the driver for his insurance. They ask me if I need an ambulance or something. I just want to GTFO, pick up my bike and walk to my friend's house. Next day I can't even move from the bed. I can't explain this shit. I should have died or at least be severely injured. I just have some minor damage on my right ankle. I believe the adrenaline rush helped me get to my destination.
I think I read somewhere that only a fifth, or minority at the least, of people in a heart attack blackout type situation that would produce a near-death experience even have one, and who knows if they're real. That all being said, it's very strange that a theme common enough to be written about is the choice of going back when people do have a near-death experience. Also, as an umbrella thought, there's no evolutionary benefit that having a near-death experience would give you a better chance of spreading your genes via offspring. I think the fact it's so weird, and as evolving apes over the millennia, you just wouldn't have enough of a sample size of young apes getting eaten by predators, and losing blood, having heart attacks. But having a giant brain trip is the thing that allows you to come back and have kids. Especially not enough of that situation happening to be a thing bred into our genes. It feels like it's less of a brain trip, especially how some people just don't feel afraid of death afterwards, if anything that makes it dysgenic, and it kind of feels more of a veils crossing over kind of thing.
Do you believe in it? Honestly, it's the biggest thing that held me back when I was on the edge. Knowing the gun won't just fail to fire, but the timeline I land in I miraculously survive, disfigured and disabled, along with the same problem I was running from. How cruel the universe can be.
You only have one of each existence. Quantum immortality isn't moving you into a world you didn't die in. It moves you into one of the worlds you are still alive in.
Roughly how many worlds would that be? Near infinite? How close to death must one be to switch over?
I don't know, but I think the number varies based upon the conditions of your birth and the level of your awareness as you transition between realms. From what it seems to me, I have a lot of non-physical existence, and only a small portion of physical existence. I had other physical bodies in 3 alien dimensions after I made agreements with them to be born there, but my experience of these bodies wasn't entirely like it is of my human body. In each case, I wasn't able to stabilize my identity into the alien body because I still had a living human body, and that body had precedence over my existence and soul. That meant I couldn't stay alive in them for long, or conscious of them. In the first case, I was astral projecting and practicing dream sorcery. I met a Grey, and it communicated with me, and took me into a dimension of their own intelligence and awareness, where they woke up my soul into one of their bodies in suspended animation on a table. My soul perceived this through an act of sorcery, so I wasn't fully tuned into the biology of the body. It felt more like I was telepathically willing it to move around. This made my heart rate spike extremely high, so I died and transferred back to my Earth body. Second case, I was born as a reptilian entity on one of their planets. This identity seemed so strong that I couldn't wake up from it back to Earth. I spent what seemed like a long time there communicating with them. They told me I would live to 18 months, receiving training as a warrior, but I wanted no part in that and longed to return to Earth. I ascended to 4th density awareness and was able to catapult my body out of the planetary sphere and through interstellar space by utilizing a gravitational wormhole, which basically pulled me towards another planetary body, which I chose as Earth. I arrived here, realized I wouldn't be able to fly into the planet and disclose aliens to humans, as I would burn up upon re-entry. As I was in space running out of consciousness, an Pleiadian ship picked me up. A woman inside asked me why I hated my children, and then talked about what seemed like corporate genetic trade secrets that the reptilian experiment was running, and I agreed to defect to the Pleiadians. I had, of course, already been having Pleiadian dreams. That was merely how that particular dream sequence ended. But I did have another physical life, where I was remote viewing the Pleiades, and they communicated with my telepathic awareness and pulled me into a device which essentially created a 3rd-dimensional vessel for me to occupy in the form of a dolphin. I watched as awareness while these molecular machines were self-assembling the DNA and vessel for me based upon a soul vibrational frequency I was emitting. I was born, more like made into a dolphin, but when I became conscious in that form, it felt like there was this feminine goddess-like awareness inside the dolphin body with me who was helping me be alive. They were going to feed me, but at that point, my consciousness decided that rather than believe and make this vision real, it should return to Earth and live as a human in the body I was already born into. I haven't been able to dream back into that particular dream sequence, but now I have been able to dream as a dolphin in the Pleiades, and on occasion I perceive the dolphin form as a projection of my astral body, but it feels a bit like looking at a holographic field of light showing me a very subtle and hard to solidly connect with projection of an image. All in all, my experiences suggest that we live on many worlds through our dreams, but to physically be alive in a particular dimension is quite a special event, and something that requires a form of birth or initiation by the intelligence native to that dimension, in order to solidly fixate the soul into a particular stream of light and consciousness, otherwise perceived as a lifetime.
I wonder who determines which existence takes precedence over the others. Have you made contact with beings higher, that greys or reptilians? Or are these creatures godlike, with nothing above them? Also intrigued about your travels through wormholes. Was this travailing of realms all done via your consciousness, or was this physical? I'm trying to understand the key between consciousness and physicality, as there are many who recount telekinesis with these beings as a method of contact.
I think the soul decides what is most important to it. The more awareness you cultivate, the more you have to spread around to all of your existence. They are sort of all there. But we tend to focus on this one due to its immediacy. Arcturians, Andromedans, Pleiadians all seem pretty dang impressive too. I think each of these alien species is impressive in different ways, and to max out our psychic potential of the galaxy, we should integrate aspects of all of them. But perhaps others don't share that view. The more different something is to ourselves, the more it can overlap, without occupying the same space we do. Meaning the more aware we are of the aliens, the more spectra of totality our consciousness can encompass, without overriding itself. Basically, each interdimensional genomic potential, all existing simultaneously combined into one cosmic awareness, gives the entity more total awareness of existence and more genetic potential to perceive more advantageous evolutionary potentials, rather than simply existing as one particular alien form. These entities are multi-dimensional beings, don't forget that. It felt like a dream that had become physical to the extent I believed it was fully real, and perhaps subconsciously I wanted to attempt physically traveling to Earth rather than waking myself back up on Earth, and so I went along with my fears. In that dream, my reptilian body had the capability to physically travel through planetary space and deep space, but it didn't ultimately survive the journey, which is how I woke up back on Earth. This was all through consciousness, none of it physical, though one encounter in particular made me consider the nature of physical. It was with a Zeta Reticuli woman who I telepathically sensed while I was drifting to sleep, and so our awareness interacted with each other due to curiosity. She basically helped me raise my vibration and project my awareness into a parallel reality of my house, and so we walked around and went to my living room. Then she got a syringe and injected my neck, which made my mind psychedelically perceive chemical structures from neurotransmitters in the injection they gave me, which apparently were chemical substances that the Zeta had within their own minds, and that made my telepathic awareness more similar to theirs and expanded its capabilities. Most of this communication was done with them by imagining images and symbols which represented concepts held in memory. They seemed amused that I liked anime images, and they basically made stuff in my mind in that format, and we projected characters which interacted in various ways until we could communicate. They asked if I wanted to visit their ship, which I was hesitant about, but I agreed. Then they tried to lift my vibration further, but at that point I became aware that it wasn't just me and her, that their whole group was telepathically perceiving us, and that made me a bit withdrawn and fearful. Then I teleported with them out into my driveway over the asphalt, but I felt like I couldn't get a strong enough boost to raise my vibration above the Earth to go to their ship, and so I landed back into my bed. I think it's some kind of etheric body made of energy that can morph itself into multidimensional awareness.
I believe in it. In fact, I also believe it's why reality is getting increasingly weirder. I also believe that the whole UAP shit might be one of the major catalysts to carry it forward. I also have a theory that because quantum immortality states our consciousness always shifts to another universe where it survives, what happens is after millions or trillions of years, you end up being nothing short of godlike pure consciousness alone in the void, capable of incredible acts of imagination, to the point that you dream an entire universe into being, and the cycle continues.
I am very certain I passed away from a heart attack in May of 2021. I had chest pains on and off for a week, but didn't think it serious enough to go to the hospital. I woke up one day, and the chest pains were completely gone. I felt so much better. I began to notice big changes around me, though. I had a second blind spot in my right eye, when I only had one before. A broken object was like new again and showed no signs of damage or repair. Several movies I once enjoyed are very different now, especially the endings. The biggest change I discovered last December. I was at a cemetery where the woman I love is buried. Due to her culture, The date of death is not put on the gravestone, but the date of burial is used instead. She was extremely important to me, and I distinctly remember attending her funeral on June 10th, more than 30 years ago. It would be easy to say I just don't remember clearly after so many years. But I loved her, and forgetting the date of their funeral would be unforgivable. She meant everything to me. The date was seared into my memory. Plus, I was into numerology for many years. Numerologists regard the numbers 11 and 22 as master numbers. She was born on the 22nd, so if the other date on the stone had been 11, I would have regarded that as a bad omen and blamed the numbers for what happened. However, with the funeral having been on the 10th, I was relieved. It was one digit off, and therefore the numbers had nothing to do with their passing. I also had visited her grave within the last few years, and I know the date was still the 10th. I saw it myself. So this past December, imagine my tremendous surprise to find that the date on the stone is now the 11th. It isn't right, but it's there. And the numbers of the 11 are just as weathered and worn as all the other letters and numbers. There is no evidence of tampering or changes having been made. It is appalling and horrifying, and a strange sort of confirmation at the same time. It has caused me an existential crisis, and I just need to leave this somewhere.
I haven't been able to shake the feeling that maybe I'm living in my dying moments. Something's always felt off about the car crash I had 7 or 8 years ago. I used to drive the same route to work and back 5 days a week, and had been doing it for years. Part of my route took me down a country road, early morning, usually not much traffic. It was the same the morning of the accident. God knows why, but I chose to overtake a massive lorry in front. I still don't know why I chose to do that. Totally out of character then and now. The speed reduction caused wasn't a massive inconvenience, and the road is notoriously dangerous. Except for that one time, I'd never tried to overtake on that road, as it's just so risky. Anyway, I tried to overtake, got halfway only to be confronted by a bus coming the other way. I remember thinking, oh fuck, and not much else. Apparently I shot past the lorry to try and get out of the way of the bus, totally fucked the passenger's side of the car by crashing into the lorry, came off the road and rolled through the field next to it before the tree line stopped me. I had to kick my way out of the car. In the meantime, the poor fucker driving the lorry had called all emergency services as, quoting lorry driver, he assumed there's no way I'm alive, and if I am, I would need to be cut out. That's the one thing I still feel terrible about. I hope that guy had no lasting trauma from the shitty choice I made. I vaguely remember taking off my belt and landing on the roof, but it's such a trope in films and TV, I'm not sure it's a real memory. First reliable memory is walking away from the car across the field. I had an ambulance come and check me out by the roadside. No shock, no injuries, not a scratch on me. I was told I wouldn't feel anything till the next day, but it would probably be like having whiplash all over. Not a single aching muscle the next day or any other day. I drive past that spot all the time. Sometimes I wonder if I actually made it out after all. Maybe all of this is not actually my life. Maybe it's the last vestige of a dying brain trapped in a ruined body that's still in that car. Since that day, I've been really fortunate in life. It's not that I haven't had challenges to deal with, but the vast majority of the time, things seem to work in my favor without any reason for it. It's like I've been given an extra sprinkling of good luck. It's to the extent that I don't trust that this is my life, not completely. Maybe it's all just wishful thinking in my brain trying to live the life I won't get.
Is it possible to prove? Supposedly, anytime you die in a dream and then wake up, you really died in a parallel reality, and your soul got shifted to this one. In this reality, I suppose you could try chanting the words "quantum immortality is real" for years, all your life, and really start to chant them on your deathbed, and then when you die in this dream and shift to another reality, you'll have a dream of a version of yourself constantly chanting "quantum immortality is real."
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.